Hey bookworms!
I'm BookMouse.
And I'm BookKitty, and this is our BookNook.
Today we are dipping our toes into the land of Valdemar, created by Mercedes Lackey.
The trilogy begins with Arrows of the Queen, continues with Arrow's Flight, and completes with Arrow's Fall.
The series doesn't stop there. It continues with many more books that she's written, continuing the saga of the Heralds and the world of Valdemar.
So let's find out what it means to be chosen. So Mouse, why don't you tell us how you chose this book for this week and why?
She's one of my favorite authors, and this happens to be one of my favorite series. I actually discovered it by accident years ago in a library that had one of those sell-off deals going where you can get books for 25 cents.
I love book sales.
I got the first book, Arrows of the Queen, and was so sucked into the world. By the end of the book, I wanted to be a herald, and you'll learn what that means. But I had to go find the next couple of books, and then discovered that it wasn't just a couple of books. There are literally a dozen or more books in this series, and characters for each set of books. There's continuity, and you start to fall in love with their history, rooting for the good guys, booing the bad guys.
Suspicious of the I don't know guys.
Yes. And I just
got my own theories.
Really became engrossed in this series.
We tried to do all three just because she had already recently read all three of these again. And we had announced last week we were going to do book one, but then I was like, you know what, I'm into this. I read the first one in less than a day. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and get the other two done. I am 144 pages away from the end. That's it. And I didn't make it. I didn't make my deadline. And I'm so sad because, like, oh my God, I want to know.
But I'm not telling you.
Yeah, but I got to discover it myself. So that'll be done tonight, but it'll be after filming. So I won't be able to talk about the ending, but we can talk about the rest of it. So anyway, this is one of your favorite series.
Yes.
And that's funny because we did my favorite series last week, and now we did your favorite series, and this is so great. Oh my God. What are we going to do next week? Stick around to the end of the video to find out. How many times have you actually read this?
4 or 5.
So what was it like your first time versus this time?
The first time I read this book, I was so caught up in the history of the kingdom and caught up in the life of the central character, Talia. She is the central character. I began to empathize with her. I began to imagine her life. I really got drawn into the fact that they have a form of magic and they accept it. And she suddenly has abilities that she didn't have before that were a result of her being chosen. And I loved the way that the author explains the choosing process, explains the heralds and their companions. And so the first time I read it was all about the adventure. As times go by, I started to read more into it and realizing there's political intrigue in there.
The nuance.
There's nuances to relationships in there. There's different, I wouldn't say classes of people, but there are different collegia on the
different classes in terms of like D&D rather than different classes in terms of wealth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a case of you have the Bardic College. Those are people with the Bardic talent, music, information sharing,
acting,
any kind of like performance. Yes, and crowd control a little bit. And then there's the Healer's Collegium, and they have the ability to heal all kinds of injuries. And then you have the Herald's Collegium, which is specifically geared towards the Chosen, to train them to become the Heralds of Valdemar.
And the heralds are basically paladins. If any of you play D&D, you'll know what that means. There are no evil heralds. There might be evil paladins in some games, but there are no evil heralds. They are all well and truly good. The companions choose them because of such.
Yes. In fact, there's a point in the book where one of the heralds mentioned it felt as if he was being measured when he met his companion the first time.
I remember that being mentioned, yeah.
And so...
But they don't really know what they take measure of. They just kind of had that... Some of the stronger bonds had that sort of feeling. Not all of them felt that.
No. But you learn through the book that it is the companion that makes you a herald. The companion sees into you and sees that you are a good person.
Truly good.
A truly good person that will fight for the well-being of the people of the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I found interesting, that they point out that the kingdom is just the kingdom. It's the people that make Valdemar. And the heralds are there for the people. And I love the fact that part of this kingdom, in order to be king or queen, the law is that you must be a herald. So
in order to be named heir, you must be at least training to be. You must be chosen. Sorry, you must be chosen, which is two different things. You start off as a chosen, in which case, when you're a herald, you're still chosen, but like you earn herald as you go through your training and so on and so forth. So like chosen is like the rookie level, and then herald is like the upper level, and then you've got the one position at the top. The one position at the top, that's the monarch's own.
Yes.
Oof.
And it's a hell of a position.
So the heralds, their job, they are there to judge when matters are too close to the people in the villages that do judge, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Their duty is to back up and lead armies when there isn't somebody available until the army does arrive. They're also there to help between feuds and disagreements. They're there to help protect from raiders and pirates and things. They can marry people.
Yes. And they're also they disseminate information.
Yes,
when
that's
new
right,
laws come out of the capital, they take it to the villages and the towns and share the new law, explain the new law, and enforce the new law.
Which is kind of their original purpose.
Yes.
A herald, you're there to herald things. You're there to actually tell people things. But then the companions changed everything, and the heralds grew a whole new side of their job, and that's where some of the magic comes in and the companions. And then there's the Queen's Own, who's, in this case, the Queen's Own, but it's the Monarch's Own, in which case her job is to actually advise the Queen, because heralds are uncorruptible. She is the one, and it's a she in this story, but it could be a he. It could be a he and a queen. You know, a king's own who is a male, and they are chosen regardless of sex or age. But yeah, the queen's own job is to literally advise the queen, because she's impartial to she's not impartial to everything, but she's uncorruptible. Yes. Literally, heralds are uncorruptible by nature. That's why they're chosen by their companions. It's one of the things that the companions are essentially measuring.
They will die before betraying their oaths. And I think Mercedes did a good job of giving you a sense of how deep that commitment is. I think when she explains the companions and how they came to be and their role with the Herald, you start to realize that there's a lot in play here.
It's a calling. It's not just a chosen profession. It's a calling.
And
they're not forced. It's not forced upon them. That's the other thing that this book is different from most you're special kind of books, in the fact that it's not like you're special and you have to do this thing. It's you're special. You have the choice. do you want to be chosen? They're honest up front with them by telling them this is not what the stories are like. The stories are great, and yeah, sometimes it's like that, but it's grueling work, and it's unforgiving, and it's gonna suck, and training is gonna be rigorous, and you're gonna hate us, you're gonna hate yourself. You have to choose to continue on this path, and that I found very different.
It was nice, and I mean, they were so honest that in orientation, they were told most heralds never see old age. They are the warriors of the country, and they do not see old age.
And during orientation, they were given the chance to walk out, and then nobody walked out, and they asked why. And these kids are about 11 to 13 in this particular year group. But they're asked, why aren't you walking out the door if you were just told this? And one of them stands up and says, because we knew what we were getting into. We knew that we're putting our lives at risk for the kingdom. We chose to be here. Our commitment is our commitment. We're like, we have to do it. We feel like this is something we are called to do. We have to do as a part of ourselves. So it goes real deep, real deep, especially
really
after they bond with their companion.
Oh, yes.
That bond is incredible. First book, Arrows of the Queen, is the beginning of Talia's adventure. I love that name, by the way. And she begins her journey in her holdfast. She is sheltered from the world around her. She's in a small, massive family setting where it's like a family is a village. Like, there's several wives to one husband. There's a bunch of littles, as they call them, children.
Yes.
And she's coming of age. They're trying to wed her off at 13, and she doesn't know anything about the world around her. The event happens that carts her off on her journey, that kind of catalyst. The catalyst happens, and she begins her journey. And so then as she travels on her journey, she's learning a lot about the world around her that she had no idea, and she's completely submerged in stuff that she knew nothing about. And as readers, we know nothing about it as well, which allows the sheltered upbringing of the main character, allows the author a little bit of leeway when it comes to exposition and giving you background on the world. And that I understand. I kind of felt through the first half of the first book that I was, like, the author was holding my hand through it, which I feel bad about because I really enjoyed the story so much. I could not put it down. And that's, I think, why it disappointed me so much, because I felt like my hand was being held. I felt like the author had no faith in her readers. Now, that may be because I might not be her target demographic. It may be because she's setting up for a series, which by the time I got to the second half of the first book and into the second and the third book, I did notice that my hand felt like it wasn't being held as much. There was still a little bit at the beginning of each book, and the prologue kind of drove me nuts because that was nothing but a summary of the previous book, and that's not how I see what prologues are supposed to be. But that's my own personal opinion. But I did not feel like my hand was being held quite as much with the second and third book, which made me happy because, like I said, I really enjoyed the story so much. I didn't resonate with Talia because I am clearly not an introverted person, and she is very much an introverted person. Even when she starts to come out of her shell, she's still very introverted, and being an empath, she kind of needs to be, and just being the way she was raised. Yes. But the writer did a good job of getting me to empathize with her, even though I don't have that major character personality trait in common with her. I was able to strongly empathize with a character that I know nothing about the struggles she's going through because I don't have those same struggles.
And I think, too, she does a good job with giving you insights into the other characters. You meet other characters and you're like, oh, this is just going to be a mention and go on, but she doesn't. She
always circles back around.
It does. It circles back around.
I love how Dirk was the first one she ever saw, and then the thing happens. Oh my God, I ship them so hard. I need them to get together. But again, I haven't finished the third book.
and casually mentioning a little something, just a hint for future books, she might casually mention something like the Tedral Wars. It's just casually mentioned from one of the old soldiers, And then later in other books, she fleshes it out. So a one sentence mention gets to be fleshed out later. I remember an interview she did where Talia, at the very beginning, is reading a history book about one of the last true mages of Valdemar. And that little bit became its own 3-book series because he was so integral.
She was so interested in that book. The readers of her book wanted to know what the book she was reading was telling her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was amazing, the way she ties things together.
Ooh, and what I found interesting is not only that, I did not notice this till literally like an hour before we started filming. So after I stopped reading, she mentioned songs in the book that they're singing as part of their revelry or part of a funeral memorial service, or which isn't really a good way to describe it, but these different places where there's music. And she has the lyrics written out in the end of the book.
Yes.
She writes out the title of the song that was mentioned in the book, which book it is, because this is the 3-in-1, and who sang it, and approximately when. It was this character to this character or something like that. And I was just like, whoa, that's so cool. The only other person I know of that did that. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of others, but the one who did it so well was, of course, Tolkien. Tolkien did that in The Hobbit, and I believe also Lord of the Rings trilogy as well. Nobody did it as good as Tolkien. But I was impressed that the author had put that effort into it. She clearly is into the world building.
Yes, and
I think
and
I see a theme here.
BookKitty feels about world building. I love the characters.
You brought the book to me.
But I have to admit, I just feel like Mercedes did a delicate balancing act with. Some people throw magic out there, and we've discussed this before. Overpowering the magic. There's no rules.
There's no sacrifice.
And you're just this super being.
No, they get exhausted.
They get exhausted. They actually mention that it is easier to get up and go pick up the pen off the table than to levitate it to you, because you are using your physical energy to do it. And they talk about the vulnerabilities of having these abilities.
And the fact that her gift is completely unknown.
Yeah. She's
unpredictable.
The first. And so I just like when there's rules. I like when the author takes the time, makes the effort, and really thinks.
Looks for plot holes.
It
helps when authors look for their own plot holes.
And is consistent with it through all the books. You don't have, this rule in this book, this rule in this book. She is consistent with her world building throughout the entire series. So all in all, we don't want to give away too many spoilers, but we do encourage you to take a look at this series. It has a lot of themes that at the time the book was written were a little poignant. Okay. And
it did feel like it wasn't written. Like it felt like it was written recently too.
It does, but it's
there's even same-sex relationships in there. When was it written? Do you remember?
I believe.
So this book was written in 1987. Here I was born. And it feels like it was written recently.
It does.
It feels relatively new. There's even a same-sex. There's not only a same-sex relationship, there's a same-sex relationship that could have had potential for a third in the relationship, which is progressive even now.
A bonded third, not just
a bonded third.
Not just hey, let's have some fun. A bonded third. And
true throuple.
And on top of that, she has some interesting. This is not a religious book. It doesn't really touch on religion, except that this is a world of many peoples with many gods. And I find it interesting how she deals with religion in the book.
And how the law of the land is that there is no one way.
And I kind of like that. I like that she's not over the top with the religion.
But she acknowledges that the world has it and has more than one.
Exactly.
Some authors completely ignore that. They have one topography, Star Wars, or they have one language, or they have one political view, or one religion, and I'm like, that's just not realistic.
No. So I do recommend this series. Start with Arrows of the Queen, and then explore the other trilogies that are out there that tell more about other character stories. And hopefully you will fall in love with Valdemar as much as I did.
So what do you say? I think I'm ready to give it.
You ready to give it?
4 paws up.
up.
Let us know in the comments if you want us to go a little bit more in depth into some of these books. If you want us to actually be, talking about some of the spoilers and the things that happens and reactions, or if you'd rather we just stay a little bit more vague.
Just pique your interest.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments below or on our discussion on our channel. You don't want to miss next week. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at book 1 of the All Souls Trilogy, the New York Times bestseller, A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. BookMouse has never read it before. I read it quite a few years ago, so I don't really remember much of it. I'm really looking forward to rereading this.
Jogging your memory.
Yes, just a bit.
This has been BookMouse.
And BookKitty, signing off. If you want to know a little bit more about why we're here and what we're doing and who we are, go ahead and take a look at this video up here. And if you're looking for something else that we've read, why don't you try Necrotech down there? And of course, don't forget to subscribe below so you don't miss our videos every Monday at 2 p.m. Central. Bye.